The blizzard's orphans. Lily's vision blurred, the blizzard's icy daggers pricking her skin. She drew Rose closer, the girl's tiny hand swallowed whole within Lily's bulky mitten. A savage wind clawed at their worn coats, a hungry predator seeking purchase. Almost there, Rosie, Lily yelled, her words swallowed by the tempest's roar. Aunt Millie's shouldn't be far. Rose's chin quivered. The swirling flakes, like minuscule stars, obscured her sight. I'm freezing, Lily. So cold. Lily gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. I know, love. Me too. But we must press on. Remember Papa's words? Every journey finds its end. Rose sniffled, her breath blooming into ephemeral clouds. But if we can't find our way? A sharp pang resonated in Lily's chest. Suppressing her fear, she forced a bright expression. We will. Aunt Millie's place is, well, unique. Remember Mama's stories? The blazing hearth, the spiced cookies, her voice faltered. Spiced cookies. An echo from a forgotten era. Just months ago, life had been a symphony of joy. Mama's lilting melodies as she worked the dough, Papa's resonating voice narrating tales by the fire, Rose's bubbling laughter as she chased butterflies through sun-drenched fields. Lily recalled the scent of burning wood and evergreens, Mama's gentle hand stroking her hair, the security of Papa's bare hugs. Those memories were now cherished treasures locked away in her heart's vault. Then the fever swept through, claiming Mama first, then Papa, leaving Lily, barely 13, responsible for her 7-year-old sister. The neighbors offered what they could, a loaf of bread, hushed condolences, but their own families demanded their attention. And winter loomed, a ravenous beast at their doorstep. Aunt Millie, Papa's eccentric sister, was their last resort. She dwelled in seclusion in a mountain cabin, a place shrouded in rumor. Lily couldn't even be certain Millie knew of their existence. Yet, Papa had always said Millie might be unusual, but her heart is true. The wind intensified, lashing the snow into a disorienting whiteout. Lily stumbled, nearly losing purchase on the slick path. She righted Rose, her own muscles screaming in protest. The world had dissolved into a dizzying white void, erasing any trace of familiar landmarks. Panic began to snake its way into Lily's thoughts, frigid and cutting as the gale. Lily, I can't see, Rose cried, burrowing her face into Lily's coat. I want to be home. Home. The word reverberated in Lily's mind, a bitter reminder of their loss. There was no home to return to, only the remorseless wilderness and the fragile hope of finding a relative she barely knew. We're nearly there, Rosie, Lily assured her, a tremor in her voice. Just a little further. Think of Aunt Millie's fire, snapping and warm. Imagine the rich cocoa, topped with marshmallows. She conjured an image of refuge and comfort clinging to it like a lifeline. Yet, even as she spoke, uncertainty dogged her. How much further could they travel? How much more could they withstand this relentless onslaught? Suddenly, Rose tugged urgently, her petite frame shuddering. Lily, look. Lily followed her pointing finger, a spark of hope igniting within her. Through the tempestuous swirl, she glimpsed it, a fragile beacon, a promise against the stormy dark. The glow from a window. A cabin, she whispered, her voice raspy with relief. It's Aunt Millie's. But their elation was fleeting. As they staggered toward the glow, the wind seemed to amplify its power, shoving them back, mocking their frail optimism. The snow deepened, engulfing their boots with each desperate step. The cold intensified, chilling them to their very core. Lily sensed her strength ebbing away. Her limbs felt leaden, her lungs burned with each shallow breath. Rose's pace faltered, her steps dragging and uneven. We have to keep moving, Rosie, Lily choked out, her voice barely audible. Just a little further. But Rose didn't respond. Lily peered down to see her sister's eyes were shut tight, her face ashen and still. Rose! Lily cried, gently shaking her. Rosie, please wake up. We're almost there. But Rose remained inert, her small body going limp in Lily's arms. A wave of despair crashed over Lily, icy and all-consuming. She could no longer carry her. She could barely stand herself. The cabin's light seemed impossibly distant, a cruel just amidst the blinding storm. Tears froze on Lily's face. She had failed. She had vowed to protect Rose, and now she was failing her. She sank to her knees in the snow, embracing Rose tightly, her own body quaking uncontrollably. The wind howled, a desolate lament for two souls adrift. I'm so sorry, Rosie, she whimpered, her voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry. And then, as a gathering darkness started to obscure her senses, she noticed something. A shape materializing from the swirling flurries, a shadowy form against the faint luminescence of the cabin. Someone was approaching. But who was it? Savior or threat? Lily couldn't discern. She couldn't even think straight. She could only offer a silent prayer that whoever approached, they weren't too late. A wounded stranger. The shape in the snow congealed into a man, splayed like a broken doll amidst the drift. A large, ebony dog sat vigilantly nearby, its amber eyes gleaming in the swirling snow. Lily lurched forward, rose a dead weight in her arms. The dog remained immobile, a low rumble emanating from its chest, a caution rather than a challenge. "Please," Lily rasped, her voice cracking in the frigid air. "We require assistance." She eased Rose down, the biting cold leaching through the flimsy blanket instantly. Kneeling, Lily brushed crystalline flakes from her sister's wan features. Rose remained inert, her breathing shallow and thready. The man stirred, a faint moan escaping his lips. Barely out of his teens, his face was raw-boned, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with a mixture of ice and gore. A spreading stain marred his heavy woolen coat. "Get out," he croaked, his voice surprisingly robust for his condition. "This isn't a place for innocence." Lily disregarded him, her focus solely on Rose. Desperation gnawed at her insides. She had to warm her, rouse her. She chafed Rose's hands, attempting to coax warmth back into them. "I said go." The man strained to sit upright, his face a mask of pain. The dog stood, a silent sentinel, its gaze locked on Lily. "This is your only warning. I'm not someone you want to know." "We have nowhere," Lily replied, her voice shaking. "My sister, she's freezing." She met his gaze, pleading silently. "Please, could you lend aid? Just until the storm abates." He scrutinized her, his dark eyes intense. For a fleeting instant, Lily detected something within them. Remorse? Compassion? It vanished quickly, replaced by a steely resolve. "I'm in no position to help anyone," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "Aiding you will only lead to your demise." He coughed, a harsh, racking sound. "Retrace your steps. Perhaps someone will happen across you." Lily's spirits plummeted. She recalled her mother's oft-repeated mantra from their impoverished lives, "Always extend a hand, Lilybug. Even when you're empty-handed, offer what you can." "My mother always preached the importance of helping those in need," Lily declared, her voice gaining strength, fueled by stubborn hope. "You're injured. We can't simply abandon you to perish." The man scoffed derisively. "Die? That's been the prevailing narrative for some time. Save your empathy." Lily edged closer, ignoring the dog's low growl. She extended a hand, hovering tentatively over the blood-soaked fabric. "Where are you wounded?" He recoiled from her touch. "That's immaterial. Just leave." "Is it a bullet wound?" Lily persisted, driven by a sudden, urgent certainty. She'd witnessed enough hunting accidents to recognize the signs. He remained silent, his jaw clenched. The dog nudged his hand with its muzzle, a silent display of concern. Lily, emboldened, reached out again, this time gently palpating the area around the crimson stain. The man gasped, a sharp intake of breath. "Here," she announced, her fingers encountering a solid mass beneath the thick material. "It's lodged here." She looked up, her eyes beseeching. "We have to extract the projectile. It will fester." He fixed her with a gaze that held a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. "You possess a rather tenacious spirit, don't you?" "I must," Lily responded, glancing at Rose's note form. "She relies on me." He sighed, a long exhalation of weariness. "Very well," he conceded, his voice barely audible. "But don't claim I didn't forewarn you." He addressed the dog. "Shadow, easy now. They're going to assist." The dog seemed to comprehend, ceasing its growling and settling back on its haunches, observing Lily with keen interest. "My name is Lily," she offered, her voice softening. "And this is my sister, Rose." "Silas," he replied, his voice tinged with a strange exhaustion. "Silas, and this is Shadow." He paused, his gaze hardening once more. "And you need to grasp one crucial point, Lily. I'm not a righteous man. My actions, they would likely shock your sensibilities. Rendering aid to me will only place you in harm's way." Lily looked at Rose, her small face pale against the pristine snow. Danger was already a constant companion. The tempest, the sub-zero temperatures, the ever-present hunger, these were threats she comprehended. But there was something lurking in Silas's eyes, a shadow hinting at a far more insidious peril, a darkness beyond her comprehension. "We'll gamble on our odds," she replied, her voice resolute. "Now let's find you sanctuary from the storm." She knew with a chilling certainty that their fates had just taken a perilous detour. But she also knew with an unwavering conviction that she could not abandon him to his end. Not while Rose's fragile life teetered in the balance. The icy path. Silas scowled, jaw clenched, as Lily dug through her pack. Shadow, the dog, remained a steadfast sentinel, his unwavering focus a weight on her shoulders. "Don't need your charity," Silas croaked, the words a raw rasp torn from his throat, a blatant untruth swallowed by the biting wind. Unheeding, Lily produced a thick woolen blanket. "Rose is fading fast. We need to warm her, and you're hardly a furnace." She carefully draped the blanket over her sister, cocooning the still form. Rose's skin felt like ice, each shallow breath a fleeting ghost against the ashen sky. He wanted to rebuff them, banish their presence, but Rose's vulnerability, her pallid complexion, stayed his tongue. A curt nod was his sole concession. Fine. Don't complain when I told you so. Lily's gaze met his, unwavering and direct. We're getting you both to safety. She shifted Rose higher on her back, adjusting the makeshift sling. Her muscles screamed, a chorus of protest she resolutely ignored, each step a victory against the elements. Silas levered himself upright, a grunt forced past his lips. He leaned heavily on Shadow, his face a roadmap of agony. The dog responded with a subtle shift, a silent offering of support. Old Trapper's cabin, he rasped, his voice thin. Closest shelter, but not easy going. They pressed onward, Lily forging a path through the mounting snow. Silas trailed behind, each movement a visible struggle. Shadow padded by his side, a quiet, ever-present guardian. The wind shrieked, flinging icy daggers that stung their faces, obscuring the already bleached landscape. The incline sharpened, the snow deepened. Lily stumbled, teetering on the edge of disaster, but regained her balance, her grip tightening around Rose. A tendril of fear snaked through her, a cold dread settling in her stomach. This was more than a mere storm, it was a visceral struggle against oblivion. Silas gestured with a mittened hand. See that rise? His voice a thread against the wind's roar. The trail, just beyond. Ice. Treacherous. They crested the ridge, and Lily's breath caught in her throat. A precarious ledge snaked along the edge of a dizzying ravine. The ice coating the path glittered under the weak light, a seductive, lethal invitation. The wind howled through the chasm, a lament that mirrored the turmoil within her. The drop was precipitous, a nauseating plunge to the jagged rocks below. A single misstep meant annihilation. Lily fought to swallow the knot of fear constricting her throat. She glanced at Rose, her face serene, devoid of color. Failure was not an option. We have to be meticulous, she managed, her voice trembling faintly. So meticulous. Silas offered a grim nod. I'll go first. Shadow stays close. He tested the icy surface, his boots sliding momentarily. He steadied himself, a statue carved from tension. Follow my lead? Small steps. Weight centered. Lily hesitated, her eyes locked on the treacherous traverse. She felt the weight of Rose, the precariousness of her sister's life, pressing down on her. She understood this journey was more than a trek, it was a crucible forging her resilience, her mettle, her sheer will to endure. Taking a deep breath, Lily readjusted Rose. Okay, she replied, her voice resolute. Let's move. She stepped onto the ice, her heart hammering against her ribs. The ground beneath her was a treacherous veneer. She took a cautious step, muscles screaming in protest as she fought to maintain equilibrium. The wind hammered at her ears, the icy path stretched ahead, and the ravine beckoned with its deadly allure. This was it. The icy traverse. The path to deliverance or to ultimate demise. Only time would unveil their fate. She looked towards Silas, his face gaunt, etched with pain, but resolute. He was waiting, a beacon of silent encouragement. Gathering her resolve, Lily advanced, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. She would not yield. She would not be defeated. She would guide them through this ordeal, no matter the ultimate sacrifice. The fall. Lily tested the ice with each step, the wind a constant, biting presence that threatened to steal her balance. Rose, nestled securely on her back, was a dead weight, her breath shallow and uneven against Lily's neck. The world was a monochrome canvas of white and gray, the only sound the mournful howl of the wind and the crunch of their boots on the frozen path. Silas had warned her about this section, a narrow traverse across a deep ravine where the ice was thin and unpredictable. Easy now, she muttered, more to herself than to Rose. Her legs burned, each muscle screaming in protest, but she pressed on, driven by a primal urge to protect her sister. The air tasted of snow and desperation. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones, numbing her fingers and toes despite the thick layers of wool. The ice, deceptively smooth and solid just moments ago, shifted subtly beneath her weight. A low groan resonated, a sound that vibrated through her very core. Her heart lurched. She froze, every nerve on high alert. Lily? Silas's voice, sharp with concern, cut through the wind. He was a few feet ahead, his broad back a reassuring presence. I think, she began, but the words died in her throat. A spiderweb of cracks erupted around her feet, spreading like a deadly disease. The ice buckled, groaned again, louder this time, a terrifying sound that echoed across the desolate landscape. Then, the world dissolved into chaos. The ice gave way completely, plunging Lily and Rose into the icy chasm. The wind roared in her ears, a deafening symphony of impending doom. For a split second, she saw Silas's face, a mask of horrified disbelief, before the ground rushed up to meet her. The impact stole her breath. A searing pain shot through her leg and her head slammed against something hard. The air was knocked from her lungs and she tumbled downwards, the icy fragments of the shattered path raining down around her. Rose's weight shifted precariously, threatening to dislodge them both. Desperate, Lily tightened her grip, her fingers clawing at Rose's threadbare coat. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. The ravine was a blur of white and gray, a dizzying vortex of icy death. Then, with a sickening thud, they landed. The snow was softer here, thankfully, but the impact still jarred her senses. She lay gasping for air, her body screaming in protest. The wind howled above, a constant reminder of their perilous situation. "Rose," she croaked, her voice barely audible above the wind. She struggled to sit up, her head swimming. The pain in her leg was intense, a sharp, stabbing agony that threatened to overwhelm her. Rose was still strapped to her back, thankfully, but her body was limp and unresponsive. Fear, cold and raw, clawed at Lily's throat. She fumbled with the straps, her numb fingers clumsy and uncooperative. Finally, she managed to free Rose, gently lowering her onto the snow. Her sister's face was ashen, her lips blue. She wasn't moving. "Rose, please," Lily pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. She pressed her ear to Rose's chest, straining to hear something, anything. A faint, fluttering heartbeat. Thank God. She was still alive, but barely. Above, Silas was a silhouette against the gray sky, his face etched with a mixture of fear and determination. "Lily," he yelled, his voice strained against the wind. "Are you all right? Are you both all right?" Lily tried to answer, but her voice was lost in the wind. She looked up at Silas, her heart pounding with a desperate plea for help. He was their only hope. Silas didn't wait for a response. He was already moving, his movements quick and decisive. He untied the rope from his waist, securing one end to a jagged outcropping of rock. His face was a rigid mask, his eyes narrowed with concentration. He tossed the other end of the rope down towards Lily. "Catch," he yelled, his voice barely audible. "Catch the rope." Lily reached out, her numb fingers grasping blindly. The rope snaked through the air, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. Her fingers brushed against it, but she couldn't get a firm grip. She tried again, her movements clumsy and desperate. The rope slipped through her fingers, tantalizingly close. "Lily, damn it, focus." Silas roared, his voice laced with urgency. She took a deep breath, focusing all her remaining energy on the task at hand. The wind whipped around her, threatening to knock her off balance, but she held firm, her eyes fixed on the lifeline. This time, her fingers closed around the rope, gripping it tightly. She held on with all her might, her knuckles white with strain. "Hold on tight." Silas yelled. "I'm coming down." A desperate grasp. The rope snaked down, landing scant inches from Lily's numb fingers. Below, the ravine yawned, a hungry maw of shadow and ice. Above, Silas stood silhouetted against the fading light, a stark, unyielding figure. He shouted, his voice barely audible above the wind's howl, "Grab it. Now." Lily lunged, pain lancing up her arm as she stretched. Her fingers brushed the coarse fibers, then closed, a desperate grasp that threatened to tear her already aching muscles. The rope burned against her skin as Silas began to pull. Rose, strapped securely to her back, felt like a leaden weight dragging her down. The upward movement was agonizingly slow. Lily dug her boots into the slick ice, trying to gain purchase, but her injured leg buckled. Each inch gained felt like a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. The wind shrieked in her ears, blurring the world into a swirling vortex of white. She could hear shadow barking frantically above, a high-pitched whine of distress that cut through the storm's fury. The sound spurred her on, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that something was counting on her. Silas's grip tightened on the rope. He braced himself against a jagged outcropping of rock, his boots digging into the snow-covered ground. His injured shoulder screamed in protest, a searing pain that threatened to overwhelm him. He ignored it. He focused solely on the rope, on the weight pulling against him, on the knowledge that 2 lives hung in the balance. The rope, borrowed from Shadow's sled, was never meant to bear such a load. It groaned under the strain, the fibers twisting and fraying. Silas could feel the vibrations through his gloved hands, a silent warning that it was reaching its breaking point. He gritted his teeth, muscles bulging, and pulled harder, ignoring the sharp stabs of agony in his shoulder. Lily felt the rope slip slightly in her hand. Panic clawed at her throat. I can't hold on," she gasped, her voice ragged and strained. "Yes, you can," Silas roared back, his voice a raw command that brooked no argument. "Don't you dare let go." His words, harsh but laced with a desperate urgency, resonated within her. She summoned a reserve of strength she didn't know she possessed, tightening her grip, digging her boots in once more. The ice offered little resistance, but she fought against it, driven by the primal instinct to survive, to protect her sister. Inch by agonizing inch, Silas hauled them upward. The ravine wall seemed to stretch endlessly, a sheer, unforgiving barrier. Lily's arms burned, her fingers were numb, her body screamed in protest. But she held on, fueled by adrenaline and a fierce determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw the edge of the ravine looming above. Silas leaned over, his face a mask of strain and exhaustion. He reached down, his hand outstretched. Almost there, he rasped, his voice hoarse. Just a little further. Lily reached up, her fingers brushing against his. His grip was strong, calloused, and reassuring. He pulled, and with a final surge of effort, she was hauled over the edge, collapsing onto the snow-covered ground. Rose, still strapped to her back, landed with a sickening thud. For a moment, Lily lay there, gasping for breath, her body trembling uncontrollably. The wind howled around them, a relentless reminder of their precarious situation. She had to get Rose out of the cold. With a groan, she rolled Rose off her back. Rose lay still, her face pale and lifeless. Lily ripped the straps from her sister's coat and laid her gently on the snowy ground. The silence was broken only by the wind and Shadow's anxious whimpers. Lily placed her ear near Rose's mouth, listening intently for any sign of breath. Faint, shallow, but there. Lily looked up at Silas, his face etched with concern. He knelt beside them, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and worry. "We need to get her warm," he said, his voice low. "Now." The sheriff's arrival. An abrupt, unfamiliar bark ripped through the gale. Not Buster's familiar woof. Lily, chilled to the bone and utterly spent, barely acknowledged it until Silas's frame went rigid beside her. He cocked his head, a muscle ticking in his clenched jaw, listening hard. "Someone's coming," he ground out, the words swallowed by the wind's fury. He offered no further explanation, but his gloved hand tightened around the rope secured to the pine's thick trunk. Minutes later, figures materialized atop the ridge, for riders etched against the swirling white. The leader, a broad-shouldered silhouette, raised a gloved fist, and the group ground to a halt. Another bark, closer now, sealed their fate. Lily's heart slammed against her ribs. Their fragile haven had been infiltrated. Silas Blackwood. The name, amplified by the wind's natural acoustics, echoed across the frozen expanse. The name meant nothing to Lily, but the effect on Silas was immediate. The lines of pain already carved into his face deepened into a mask of bleak acceptance. "That's Sheriff Brody," he breathed, his gaze locked on the descending riders. "Damn it all to hell." The sheriff spurred his mount forward, his men spreading out like a closing net. A rangy hound, its coat a patchwork of browns and grays, loped ahead, nose to the ground. As they approached, details sharpened, Brody's face, a roadmap of hardship and hard choices, the burnished gleam of badges affixed to heavy wool, the stark threat of rifles held at the ready. Brody reined in his horse, a mere arm's length away, his eyes sweeping the scene. Silas, kneeling by Rose's still form, Lily, shrinking behind him, the rope, a lifeline disappearing into the ravine's depths. His gaze narrowed, a seasoned lawman taking stock. "Silas," Brody began, his voice firm but edged with a weariness that cut through the wind. "Drop the rope and come with us. Now." Silas remained motionless. "I can't do that, Brody. Don't make this any harder than it has to be, Silas. We know about the robbery. We know the rest of it." Brody's tone carried an ominous weight. Lily's panic spiked. "Robbery? The rest of it?" What tangled web had Silas spun? She glanced at Rose, her complexion ashen against the pristine snow. There was no time for Silas's secrets. Rose's survival hung precariously in the balance. "These girls need help," Silas insisted, his voice raw with desperation. "I'm not going anywhere until they get it. Help's waiting in town, Silas. A warm bed, a doctor, and a fair trial when you surrender," Brody countered, his expression giving nothing away. "Let go of the rope, Silas. Now. I don't want any more blood spilled." "Bloodshed?" Lily choked out, the word a shard of ice in her throat. She searched Silas's face, pleading for answers. "What in God's name is happening?" Silas ignored her, his focus unwavering. "I'm not armed," he stated, his hands of ice around the rope, knuckles bone white. "But I won't release this rope. Not until I know they're safe." Brody sighed, a plume of condensation momentarily obscuring his face. "You're making a mistake, Silas. A grave one. We have warrants. We have witnesses. Witnesses can be bought," Silas shot back, his voice laced with steel. "And warrants, well, they're just paper." The hound whined, scratching impatiently at the snow. Brody shifted in his saddle, his gaze flitting between Silas, Lily, and the inert Rose. Lily met his eyes, offering a silent plea. She glimpsed a flicker of something akin to understanding, quickly shuttered by a mask of stern duty. Silas, this is your last chance. Drop the rope. Let the girls come with us. We'll get them warm fed, tended to. And you'll come peacefully. Silas's head remained fixed. No, I don't trust you. You always were a stubborn fool, Silas, Brody observed, a thread of genuine regret coloring his voice. He gave a near imperceptible nod to one of his deputies, who began to swing down from his horse. All right, Silas. You brought this on yourself. The deputy reached for the rifle slung across his back, and Lily's breath caught in her chest. This couldn't be unfolding. Not now. Not when Rose teetered on the edge of what? Lily didn't even know if Rose still clung to life. Silas coiled ready to defend them with nothing but that length of rope. But he stood no chance against 4 armed men, not with Rose sprawled, helpless, beside him and Lily trembling from the encroaching cold. They were cornered, trapped between the long arm of the law and the indifferent wilderness, with a young girl's very existence hanging by a thread. The wind keened, a mournful lament echoing through the desolate, snow-swept landscape. The sheriff dismounted, his expression a study in grim resolve. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for the inevitable. A bargain of freedom. The wind shrieked, a feral cry ripping through the desolate landscape. Lily's teeth clattered, a frantic percussion against the numbing cold. Each snowflake was a tiny, icy dart against her skin. Rose remained motionless, a pale effigy against the snow's relentless advance. Too still by far. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Silas, she begged, her voice breaking apart. Please tell me she'll be all right. Tell me they can help her. Silas hesitated, his gaze fixed on Brody, his features an unreadable tableau. The sheriff, his face crimson with cold, met Silas's stare with a weary fortitude. The air vibrated with tension, a palpable force in the swirling white hell. At long last, Silas spoke, his voice a rough rasp swallowed by the tempest. Brody. Blackwood, the sheriff responded, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. I'm making you an offer. Brody's eyes narrowed to slits. Go on. See to the girls' safety. Get them out of this. Rose needs a doctor. Immediately. Silas's gaze brushed Rose's prone form, a fleeting vulnerability cracking his stoic facade. Brody remained impassive for a long moment, his eyes flickering between Rose and Silas. And what's in it for you, Blackwood? You think I'll just let you walk away? I'm surrendering, Silas declared, the words forced from him, laden with bitter acceptance. I'll go willingly. No resistance. Just get them out of this accursed storm. A gasp escaped Lily's lips. Silas, don't. You can't do that. He didn't acknowledge her, his focus laser-locked on Brody. Surprise flickered across the sheriff's face, momentarily softening the harsh lines carved by years of hard-won justice. Clearly, he hadn't anticipated this gambit. You're offering yourself up. For them, he questioned, disbelief underscoring his tone. Silas's jaw clenched. Their lives outweigh mine. The words were stark and devoid of sentimentality, only a desperate urgency pulsed within them. Brody wavered. Lily witnessed the internal conflict playing out on his face. He was a man of the law, yet the sight of the girls, especially Rose's deathly pallor, clearly tugged at him. He glanced at his men, their expressions grim, their bodies contorted against the blizzard's assault. Finally, a sigh, heavy with resignation, escaped him. All right, Blackwood. I accept your terms. But any hint of treachery, the threat hung unspoken, a sharp edge in the frigid air. You have my solemn promise, Silas replied, his voice unwavering. Brody gestured to his deputies. Jenkins, Reynolds, get those girls inside now. Fetch the sled. Gently with the little one. 2 deputies, their faces grim, rushed forward. Jenkins carefully lifted Rose into his arms, his movements surprisingly tender. Reynolds struggled to free the sled from the imprisoning snowdrift. Lily, shivering violently, watched as they tenderly placed Rose on the sled, swaddling her in blankets. Lily, go with them, Silas directed, his gaze finally meeting hers. His eyes, usually like chips of flint, now held a desperate plea. Get her warm. See that she recovers. But what about you? Lily's voice shook uncontrollably. I'll manage, he said, though his words lacked all conviction. Brody advanced, flanked by 2 more deputies. All right, Blackwood. Let's move. He produced a pair of cold, iron manacles. Lily watched, tears freezing on her cheeks, as Silas submitted to Brody's constraints. He offered no resistance, no argument. He simply stood, a captured man resigning himself to his fate. As the deputies escorted Silas away, Lily stumbled after the sled, her gaze glued to Rose's annoyed face. The snow continued its relentless descent, obscuring the world in a swirling, blinding whiteout. She risked a backward glance, catching a fleeting glimpse of Silas's shape dissolving into the storm, a solitary figure consumed by the driving snow. A lump constricted her throat. Lily gasped, her lungs rebelling against the abrupt change in temperature. Rose remained unnervingly still, her complexion ashen even in the lamplight's weak glow. With somber faces, two of Brody's men carefully moved Rose onto a bed cobbled from thick blankets. "Thank you," Lily rasped, her voice a mere breath. Brody simply nodded, his attention riveted on Silas, who stood unmoving amidst the controlled chaos. With him there, the room felt claustrophobic, buzzing with an unspoken electricity. "The doc from Oak Haven's on his way," Brody stated, his voice gravelly. "Should be here within the hour. Sounds like pneumonia, at best, he figures." Lily's breath hitched, the diagnosis hung in the air, heavy with dread. Pneumonia. She knew its potential. The fever that could extinguish a life as effortlessly as the gale scattered snowflakes. She knelt by Rose, her fingertips ghosting across the delicate curve of her face. The moment stretched taut, broken only by a low rumble emanating from the doorway. Shadow. The dog stood firm, his dark gaze fierce, the fur along his spine bristling as Brody's men moved to restrain Silas. A savage growl tore from Shadow's throat, a raw threat to anyone who dared lay a hand on his master. "Shadow, heel!" Silas barked, his voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. The dog faltered, his body trembling with conflicting instincts. He flicked his gaze between Silas and the approaching men, a soft whine escaping him. "Easy, boy," Silas soothed, a tremor of desperation in his voice. "They won't hurt me. Stay." Shadow defied him. He crept nearer to Silas, his muscles coiled and ready to spring. The deputies hesitated, wary of the powerful animal. Brody sighed, dragging a hand down his weathered face. "Silas, call him off. Don't make this any harder." Silas met Brody's gaze, something indecipherable flickered between them. He recognized this ritual, knew its inevitable conclusion. He looked down at Shadow, his expression softening with profound tenderness. "He doesn't understand," Lily breathed, her voice thick with unshed tears. She did understand. She understood the fierce bond between man and beast, the unwavering loyalty that defied all reason. Silas crouched, extending a hand towards Shadow. "Come here, boy." "It's okay." Shadow remained planted, his eyes darting frantically between Silas and the deputies. He clearly sensed the gravity of the moment, the looming severance. "I have a proposition, Sheriff," Silas announced, his voice even, betraying none of the inner turmoil. Brody raised an eyebrow, his face impassive. "What kind of proposition?" "My dog," Silas said, his gaze unwavering. "His freedom in exchange for my full confession. Everything. No secrets." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. The deputies exchanged surprised glances. Brody's eyes narrowed, probing Silas's sincerity. He knew the depth of Silas's affection for the animal. "And why would you do that?" Brody inquired, a hint of suspicion coloring his tone. Silas's gaze flickered towards Lily and Rose, then returned to Brody. "Because they need help, and because Shadow deserves to be free." Brody remained silent, weighing the offer. He knew Silas was a wanted man, but he also saw the genuine concern etched on his face, the selfless nature of his offer. He also knew that Shadow, alone and untamed, would likely become a feral menace, hunted and reviled. This bargain, unconventional as it was, might be the best solution for everyone. "All right," Brody conceded, his voice resolute. "You give me your confession, everything you know, and I'll make sure Shadow gets a fair chance. A good home, somewhere safe." Silas nodded, a brief flash of relief illuminating his face. "He's a good dog, Sheriff. Loyal to a fault. He just needs someone he can trust." He turned back to Shadow, his voice tender. "Go on, boy. Go. Find yourself a place where you can run free. Be a good dog." Shadow whined, taking a tentative step forward, then another. He licked Silas's hand, a soft, plaintive sound escaping his throat. Then, with one last lingering look, he turned and vanished into the swirling white abyss. The cabin seemed to contract once more. The air grew thick with a different sort of anticipation, the promise of long-buried truths about to be unearthed, of a past about to be exposed. Lily shivered, not from the cold, but from a growing sense of foreboding. The price of devotion had been tendered, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the marrow, that the true cost would exceed anything she could possibly imagine. Journey's End. The confession was a torrent, a dam bursting after years of holding back the truth. Silas spoke in a low, gravelly voice, each word a stone laid bare in the cold light of the sheriff's lantern. He detailed the robberies, the heists, the locations of the stashed loot, enough to make Brody's pen fly across the notepad. There was no bravado, no self-pity, only a weary resignation. He spoke of desperation, of bad choices compounding on worse, but never once did he try to excuse his actions. Lily listened, huddled near the fire, Rose's shallow breaths a constant, agonizing counterpoint to Silas's grim tale. When he was done, a heavy silence filled the cabin. Brody looked up, his face etched with a mixture of satisfaction and something akin to pity. "That's it then?" Silas nodded. "Every last bit." He glanced at Lily. "Do what you can for her, for both of them." Brody rose. "I will." He gestured to two deputies who had been waiting outside. "Let's go, Blackwood." As they led Silas towards the door, Shadow stirred from his place by the hearth. He whined, a low rumble in his chest, and tried to push his way to Silas. One of the deputies held him back, but the dog strained, his eyes fixed on his master. Silas stopped at the threshold. "Shadow." His voice cracked. "Be good, boy. Stay with them." He didn't look back as the deputies escorted him into the swirling snow. A long, mournful howl echoed through the night, a sound that clawed at Lily's heart. She watched as the lantern light bobbed away, swallowed by the blizzard. The sound of the departing sled faded into the wind. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that she would never forget that sound, that moment. Brody returned, his face grim. "All right, girls. Let's get you to your aunt." He gathered Rose in his arms, her small body frighteningly light. "Can you walk, Lily?" She nodded, though her legs felt weak. Brody carried Rose out into the storm, his broad back a shield against the wind. Lily followed, the cabin shrinking behind her, a beacon extinguished. The journey to their aunt's cabin was a blur of snow and exhaustion. Lily stumbled along, her hand gripping Brody's coat. The sheriff didn't say much, but she could feel his presence, a solid, reassuring force in the chaos. She thought of Silas, alone in the cold, facing whatever awaited him. Finally, a light appeared in the distance, a warm, inviting glow that pierced the darkness. As they drew closer, Lily could make out the shape of a small cabin, smoke curling from its chimney. The door opened, and a woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. Her face was lined with worry, her eyes wide with relief. "Lily?" "Rose," she cried. "Oh, thank God you're safe." Brody carried Rose inside, laying her gently on a bed near the fire. The woman, Aunt Clara, rushed to her side, her hands fluttering over Rose's pale face. The cabin was small but cozy, filled with the scent of wood smoke and herbs. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the walls. Lily sank into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Aunt Clara turned to Brody, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Sheriff, I don't know how to thank you." Brody shrugged, his face weary. "Just glad I could get them here. Rose needs a doctor, Clara. I'll send one out as soon as the storm clears." He looked at Lily, his expression softening. "I'll take care of things, Lily. Don't you worry. You just focus on Rose." He hesitated, then added, "and Shadow. I'll make sure he's looked after until—" He trailed off, unable to voice the unspoken. Lily nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you, Sheriff." Brody touched the brim of his hat. "I should get going. Storm's not letting up." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "sometimes the line between right and wrong gets blurred. Just remember that." And then he was gone, swallowed by the storm once more. Lily watched him go, feeling a profound sense of loss. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that her life and Rose's had been irrevocably changed by Silas Blackwood and his loyal dog. Now, as the blizzard raged outside and Clara tended to Rose, Lily moved to the window and stared out into the swirling white, thinking of Silas, of Shadow, and of the journey that had brought them to this precarious, uncertain sanctuary. Hope remains. The weeks dissolved into months, punctuated only by the rhythmic complaint of Aunt Clara's rocker and Rose's fever's tenacious grip. What began as a sanctuary, their cabin now felt like a gilded trap. Lily's days revolved around scrubbing, chopping, and coaxing broth into Rose, each act a hushed supplication carried on the mountain breeze. Sheriff Brody's visits were a constant, bringing news of Silas, fragments Lily clutched like precious jewels. His trial loomed. The evidence a heavy weight. When the day came to visit him, a delicate tendril of hope unfurled in Lily's heart, a fragile vine against the stone of her despair. Though weak and wan, Rose insisted on going. Aunt Clara, her usual stoicism softened by a rare tenderness, wrapped them in thick wool. The jail was a brutal contrast to the pristine Snow's Cape, a somber gray monolith brooding against the horizon. Inside, the air hung thick with disinfectant and the ghosts of bad choices. A taciturn deputy guided them down a dim hallway, the metallic echoes of slamming doors reverberating around them. Silas waited, perched on a stool, his hands resting loosely. He was thinner, his face drawn, lines of worry now carved deep around his eyes. But recognition sparked a slow, weary smile. "Lily." "Rose," he greeted, his voice a gravelly whisper. "You came." Lily nudged Rose forward. "We had to," she responded, her voice catching in her throat. She meticulously absorbed his presence, etching every detail into her memory. Rose, with a trembling hand, unearthed a crumpled paper from her pocket, a charcoal drawing, endearingly awkward, of Shadow, tail perpetually wagging, tongue lolling in canine glee. "He misses you," Rose offered, her voice thin. "We walk him. Aunt Clara lets him sleep by the hearth." Silas's features softened, genuine amusement flickered across his lips. "He's a good boy," he said, his voice thick with restrained emotion. "Look after him, girls. He deserves it." Lily swallowed hard, fighting the sting of tears. "We will," she pledged. She longed to share Rose's persistent cough and Clara's melancholy humming while she churned, the suffocating silence blanketing their lives. But the words remained trapped. Silas scanned them, his gaze lingering on Rose's pallor. "Are you both okay?" "Rose is improving," Lily asserted, forcing a false brightness. "Aunt Clara is a wonder." He nodded slowly, unconvinced yet accepting the fabrication. That's all that counts," he murmured. The silence weighed heavily, punctuated only by distant voices. "I need to shatter it," pulsed through Lily. "Sheriff Brody, he said you helped us," she blurted. "He said you confessed everything." Silas sighed, raking a hand through disheveled hair. "It was the only decent thing to do," he stated simply. "I had ample time for reflection." Lily studied him, truly seeing him for the first time, beyond the label of criminal, a man heavy with remorse, perhaps capable of being saved. "Why?" she asked, the question tumbling out. "Why did you risk your life for us?" Silas hesitated, his gaze finding his hands. I don't know," he finally admitted. "Maybe. I saw a flicker of myself in you both. Lost souls seeking direction." He lifted his head, meeting Lily's gaze. "And maybe I just needed to do something right for once." The deputy's throat-clearing signaled the end. Lily's heart constricted. She yearned to linger, to glean understanding of the man behind the actions. But time had run out. "We have to leave," she whispered, her voice shaky. Rose reached for Silas's hand, her small fingers briefly enveloping his rough ones. "Thank you," she breathed. Silas squeezed her hand gently. "Be good, Rose," he urged, his voice scratchy. "And you, Lily, take care of her." As they turned toward the exit, Lily paused in the doorway. "We'll be back," she vowed, her voice resonating with firmness. "We will visit again." Silas nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I'd appreciate that," he said. As Lily and Rose retraced their steps, the echoing slam of the metal door reverberated and a tiny spark of warmth ignited within Lily. Not precisely hope, but a resilient ember glowing in the gloom, a reminder that even amidst despair, kindness and kinship could endure. Back at the cabin, Lily watched Shadow cavorting after snowflakes in the yard, his cheerful barks echoing through the mountainside. Rose rested by the crackling fire, her breath shallow but even. Aunt Clara rocked, humming a muted melody. Lily knew the journey ahead would be arduous. Silas's trial waited and their destiny remained unclear. Yet, gazing at Rose, at Shadow, at the familiar embrace of the mountains, she knew they weren't isolated. They had each other and the memory of a man willing to sacrifice himself for their safety. And somewhere, within the cold, unforgiving walls of the jail, Silas held the solace of knowing they were safe, that Shadow was free, and that, just maybe, even for him, redemption was not entirely beyond reach.